kind of hard to see how things are going to go when you can't see what's in front of you.
For me, it was Tuesday.
Welcome to another episode of For Me, It Was Tuesday. You can't see me, but I am your host, GQ. Today we're going to be looking at a very, very interesting movie that came out earlier this year. But before we get into that, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button.
I see you.
Like the video, leave some comments on the video, tell me what you think about my new look. Check out culturejunkies.net. Also hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Also, we've got Twitch and Discord, so we are everywhere. And since you can't see me, I might be right behind you right now. So, today we're going to be looking at The Invisible Man. Directed by Lee Winnell, starring Elisabeth Moss, Adis Hodges, Storm Reed, Harriet Dreyer, Michael Dorman, and Oliver Jackson Cohen. This film actually caught me by surprise. It was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Had a very low budget actually, $7 million budget, but they got quite a bit done with that budget. Movie starts off, it follows a character named Cecilia, played of course by Elisabeth Moss. And she is in a bad situation, in an abusive relationship with a very controlling billionaire who is actually the leader of optics in his field. Of course, that comes into play later in the film. But we start off with her essentially escaping his house and running away, meeting up with her sister, who's going to pick her up early in the morning. It's kind of the standard, well, I wouldn't even want to say standard, but it is an abusive relationship story, and then there's an escape. And of course, this guy being very controlling, he essentially controls every aspect of her life, as she describes later in the film. Basically, what to eat, how to dress, what to think. Essentially just the really, really abusive relationship. So of course that would be the last person you would want to have the ability to become invisible and stalk you. And of course that's exactly what happens. Cecilia does escape, even though her boyfriend catches up to them and punches a hole through the passenger window, which takes quite a bit of strength. So we know that this guy apparently isn't very normal. We move in a couple weeks later. She's essentially rooming with a police officer friend of hers, played by Adis Hodges, and his daughter, played by Storm Reed. And essentially she's trying to get back into the world. She knows that this guy is an optics and surveillance expert, so she's reading articles about how people can spy on you through your webcam. Essentially she's still paranoid. The guy is still kind of controlling her. And Adis Hodges' character is trying to get her, who is also a cop, is trying to get her to get back into the world, leave the house, go down to the mailbox, get the mail, just, do regular things, trying to get her back into living, basically. So a couple days later, her sister visits. She was actually kind of a little bit upset with her sister. She told her sister not to visit her because, hey, he'll follow you, he'll know where you are, blah, blah, blah. And her sister brings the news that Adrian, the character played by Oliver Jackson Cohen, who is her, of course, ex-boyfriend, has killed himself, apparently. So she doesn't quite believe it. She knows that he's very controlling, he's very conniving. So she doesn't really necessarily buy into it right away. She goes to the reading essentially of his will, more or less, and Adrian has left her $5 million to be paid in a monthly installments situation, with the contingent that she cannot be arrested or get into any type of mental trouble or legal trouble or anything like that. Interestingly enough, the lawyer that reads the will and takes care of the estate is Adrian's brother, Tom, played by Michael Dorman. You get the sense that Tom is a little bit of a Weasley character, not even just from appearance to begin with, but also just from the fact that he's reading a prepared statement at the reading of the will that is very, essentially psychologically damaging to Cecilia's character. And anybody that took a quick glance at it would have known that that's exactly what this was. It's Adrian essentially getting back in her head. So moving forward, we get into a situation where okay, something is definitely going on. And we run into what I like about what Lee Winnell has done with his directing and the director of photography has done is they give you these lingering wide shots where, because you know you're watching an Invisible Man movie, so the first thing your mind jumps to is, okay, what's going to move in the background? And he'll give you some shots where he gives you that lingering shot. He gives you the voyeur angle where it's kind of like peering around the corner and nothing happens. And I love that because it gets you in that mood of, is somebody there? When is something going to happen? And it keeps you in a kind of perpetual suspense. He doesn't use cheap jump scares as a lot of horror films these days use. And some of the moments where she does find the Invisible Man, they're truly, they're built up properly. They're not just the standard, jump scare type. It's really truly built up and essentially, as I like to say, earned. So eventually, the Invisible Man, through some pranks, gets essentially Adis's character and Storm Reed's character to kind of turn against her a little bit because he's in the cop's house and in some of the scenes, and there's of course a very well choreographed, very well shot fight sequence in the kitchen. And watching the behind the scenes on that, they used a motion control camera, and the way motion cameras work is, of course, they can recreate an exact sequence of camera movements. They can recreate perfect camera movements every single time. So since they are going to do that on a sequence, basically, the scene has to be counted out because the camera is going to do exactly what it was programmed to do no matter what you're doing. So it was really interesting to see how they filmed that whole sequence of her being attacked by the Invisible Man in the kitchen sequence. So that's definitely something to look forward to on the Blu-ray. Of course, if I tell you guys any more, it will spoil the film, and I am definitely not going to do that. You need to see this one for yourself. Elisabeth Moss does an outstanding job. Of course, she is essentially a modern-day scream queen, but I wouldn't even call her so much a scream queen. She's kind of a mixture of scream and suspense because she's done quite a few of these types of films in the past. And her acting in this is outstanding. She goes from timid, unsure of herself, seemingly psychotic, to completely in control. So she goes through the entire spectrum of emotions and state of mind, and it's really, really well done. The 4K transfer on this film is great. There are some moments where you get to dark moments where you see quite a bit of film grain. I think that is actually intentional, but I could be wrong. But outside of that, everything else looks outstanding. I love the effect of the Invisible Man and the way they're just, essentially the way this is filmed and the way this is shot. So it's definitely worth a pickup. I would highly, highly recommend that you go out and get The Invisible Man on 4K Blu-ray if you got a 4K player. If not, go ahead and get yourself a, just a Blu-ray copy of it. This one, like I said, is worth owning. It's got some good direct features. It's got about, I think, 6 or 7 deleted scenes, and it's got couple of short featurettes. The featurettes are not particularly long, and of course there is a director's commentary, so insight on the filmmaking process and some of the struggles they went through in filming this particular film. So it's definitely worth it. One thing to pay attention to is there was a job interview she went on, and there's some foreshadowing in that interview where the job interviewer is actually kind of hitting on her a little bit, but they essentially both talk about, she said, I used to live in a broom closet at my dorm, and he says, I started this firm in a supply closet, basically. And so he says they both appreciate good closet space. So that is a really interesting little nugget that they dropped in there. Also, there's a nod, or an Easter egg nod, to the original Invisible Man film back from the 30s. So it's a couple little, small things to keep an eye out for. But I'm going to leave you guys with these final words. For any of you out there, when you heard that they were going to do an Invisible Man film, you thought, oh great, they're going to go back just like they did in the early 90s with Kevin Bacon. Well, more like late 90s, but with Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Shue and Josh Brolin, Thanos. and they're gonna do Hollow Man again. And Hollow Man had its merits. It was kind of cool. Had some interesting things going on in it. But then you kind of hear that, well, they're gonna approach this one a little bit more in a horror style, and they're going to do a little bit more with it. And of course, technology being what it is, they can do outstandingly crazy things with an Invisible Man film these days. And some of you got to see this in the theater for like a week, and then the pandemic hit, and then they made it come home right away. So, if you saw it at home, like I did, outstanding film. They did a great job. So some of you might be skeptical and be thinking, okay, I don't need to see this, but you know what? You should. It's really cool. So get around to it, check it out, and remember, for me,
It was Tuesday.
you won't see me, but I'll see you guys next time. If you're enjoying our content, please consider going to our Patreon and becoming a supporter. There are different tiers to select from, and we thank you for your support.
Culture Junkies!